Hi again. If you watched my last video on early warning signs of an abusive relationship, I want to kind of continue that conversation by saying these early warning signs are incredibly important to pay attention to because abuse escalates over time. The person gets away with a little bit more each time. When they get away with it, they know that they can do that plus more. And so I am very passionate about helping people to identify and understand not just early warning signs, but what are the less overt patterns to pay attention to in an unhealthy relationship, given that those unhealthy patterns get worse in an abusive relationship and can end up with physical violence and harm, and sometimes with tragic outcomes. So one of the things that was really important to me when I started researching this topic and learning all about it many years ago, it's really important to me to start to identify sort of the less overt forms of psychological abuse. And as I did that, I came up with the term subtle abuse and defined it in my book here, If He's So Great, Why Do I Feel So Bad? Recognizing and Overcoming Subtle Abuse. And the reason I wanted to talk about subtle abuse in particular is not because, as the name might suggest to some, that it's subtle and the abuse is not that bad. It's actually not that at all. It's that these earlier warning signs, these more subtle, less overt, more covert warning signs actually are what are responsible for sort of grooming a victim and having them be more vulnerable to continuing to endure the mistreatment. It wears on a person's self-esteem. It makes them question and second guess themselves. And that's what really makes people more vulnerable to tolerating the more aggressive forms of abuse. And so when we look at what the research tells us, we actually see very clearly that subtle abuse is the most damaging to a victim's sense of confidence and sense of self-worth. And it makes the person more likely to stay in an abusive dynamic and risk worse harm or increasing or greater degrees of harm to oneself and to children. So that's why it's so important for me to talk about these sort of subtle aspects of an abusive or psychologically abusive relationship. These subtly abusive tactics happen in all abusive relationships. So whether we're talking about physical abuse, sexual abuse, financial abuse, verbal abuse, emotional and psychological abuse, these subtle tactics, these subtle patterns, they are prevalent across the board. And that's why it's so important, and I feel so passionate about educating people about these things, because they are the reason, these subtle tactics and the subtle abuse is the reason that people often will stay in the relationship questioning themselves, questioning their own sanity, their own worth, and that, of course, then leads to more vulnerability and a greater degree of abuse. So I will continue to make these videos, and feel free to write back with any questions. But my primary goal is to educate and especially women and young girls of some of these patterns, so that as they show up, you know what they are, you can see them, and you can make educated decisions for yourself accordingly before you get too committed and it's harder to extract yourself. Take care. Thank you.